Okay, we're live. We're not actually live. It's an unlisted stream, so nobody's gonna see this. Okay. Hello there.
Hello there.
Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars in a Galaxy. Watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. I'm Eli. We have our final episode right here for the summer of me, not with Jacob, who is unfortunately unavailable for right now. But we do have a guest here for the final episode of A Theme Between Themes, which I'm very excited about. We have from the GALactic Podcast, we have Lauren here. How are you doing, Lauren?
I'm good, Eli. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. This is the last recording I'm doing, as I told you off air before Jacob comes back. So this is going to be a fun little theme between themes to round this out. Before we get into theme between themes, though, I wanted to ask you. So how did you get into Star Wars? I like to know about the people we're talking with and how their Star Wars experiences.
Yeah, so, I think it's always been around since I was little. I mean, I just remember watching Empire Strikes Back on VHS and just getting, really super involved with that movie and then Return of the Jedi, obviously A New Hope and all that. So it's always been there, I think. And then I think around, The Force Awakens, it really kind of ramped up my, I think, love of Star Wars even more. And then I kind of went all in with starting a podcast with my cousin and all that stuff. So yeah, Star Wars has always been a part of my life, and it's gotten bigger as I gotten older, and my views on it have changed as I gotten older. But that I think that's part of the experience too with Star Wars. It changes as you get older for sure.
Absolutely, I definitely agree with that. I also want to ask you, how did you begin to make Star Wars content? How did you begin to do your podcast?
Yeah, so it's funny, Andrea and I, we always talked Star Wars when we were at family functions, especially when the sequel trilogy started again. And it was just one family a family event that we were at. We were talking, and my brother, who's kind of a Star Wars fan, but he's not like a super nerd like we are, but he said, he's like, you guys talk about Star Wars all the time, you guys should just do a podcast about it and just go for it. And we talked about it for a while after he brought that kind of idea up, and then we just decided to do it. And it's going to be 2 years next month since we've been doing our podcast, which is crazy. I really didn't think I'd be doing it for 2 years, for sure. So doing it and just being a part of this community has been really, really a really good experience and a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah. We can sometimes be a little bit of a crazy community, let's just say that. But
for sure, Eli.
Yeah, but there's some great people here, and I definitely agree with that. Yeah. So I guess let's get into this whole A Theme Between Themes thing. Here we go. Here's the intro right here. You're entering another plane. A plane where we leave behind the logistical issues, canon continuity, and the Easter eggs. Only here are thematic ideas and symbolic imagery. You're entering a theme between themes. What's in here? Only what you take with you. There we go. That's our little intro right there. So Lauren's topics that she chose were about the relationship between two different Star Wars characters, that being Kanan, Jarrus, and Ezra Bridger, two of the main characters from Star Wars Rebels. She chose the 3 Star Wars Rebel episode, Rise of the Old Masters, Path of the Jedi, and the Holocrons of Fate. Which I gotta admit, I haven't seen these 3 in a while. I haven't seen a lot of Rebels in a while. I've been, In a Galaxy has been very focused on Clone Wars because we're kind of in that era, so it's been a while. I know there are a lot of people out there who are who Rebels is their Star Wars, is their main Star Wars thing. And I happen to know that you're one of them, and my co-host Jacob's one of them, and I've never been one of those people where Rebels is my main thing, but I do really appreciate what Rebels gives us in a lot of its story ideas.
Right. It's huge. I mean, I don't know what it was about Rebels, but it was just a show that I think the overall theme of it, the storytelling that they told, the characters that they created and came up with, were fabulous. I mean, to have a lost Jedi like Kanan, to find a new Padawan, like Ezra, and then to have all those other characters, Hera, Sabine, Chopper, Zeb, it was a really great kind of family, just the roots of Star Wars, a family themed kind of overall story, and it was really really great. And you follow, most of it was kind of following Kanan and Ezra, but involved their their family, their adopted family, which was really cool. So yeah, Rebels is a huge. I fell into that and I loved it. It's a huge part of my kind of rewatch of Star Wars for sure. The show overall, it's great.
Absolutely. One of the things I was thinking about in terms of Rebels that I really appreciate is, like, I forgot how deep season 1 can be.
Yeah.
I remember, season 3 being absolutely incredible, season 4 being pretty much one of the best seasons of Star Wars television ever.
Agreed.
Season 1's good. Like, we looked at 2 episodes from season 1. Season 1's good. It doesn't have that expansive feel to the universe that I do love in seasons 3 and 4, but the stories they tell make sense. The ideas they offer make sense. It all feels very purposeful.
Yeah, season 1 was such a great setup, in my opinion, that I think when you look at it as a whole, it really did set up so much moving forward with that series and with the galaxy overall. I mean, we see the rebellion kind of really form within this series. You see these kind of cells that were doing their own thing, like our Rebels friends in season 1, and then what that kind of continued on in building this bigger rebellion that we see in A New Hope and all that. So yeah, season 1, I don't think it gets as much credit, like you're saying, Eli, as like being a really good starter for the TV show and setting up deep themes. I think really deep themes throughout the series, and then specifically in season 1. I mean the couple that we're going to talk about, like, pretty deep stuff. I mean, really deep stuff, deep connections to Clone Wars, deep connections to previous Star Wars material that was weaving in within the show. It's really good, and like you said, season 1 was so good. The cameos in it were fabulous. It was just an overall great season.
Absolutely, I agree. One of the things, before we dive into it, just one more thing I was thinking about, the intro of, like, your Disney Star Wars, the Star Wars that's put out by Disney. What was that? In 2014, 2015, I was a Star Wars fan. I wasn't as big as I am now, but I'm trying to remember, like, when we got Rebels Season 1, Rebels Season 2, and Force Awakens. And that's a pretty good starting roster. Like, those 3, that's like really that was their opportunity to say this is what Star Wars is going to be like moving forward. And they do Rebels Season 1, Rebels Season 2, and The Force Awakens, which is pretty darn good, if I gotta say so myself.
It's a good start, right? I think it was, if you look back on it, like you're saying, like, it's a huge start to that era of Star Wars. I mean, The Force Awakens was probably my first Star Wars Disney era like thing that I got into.
Me as well.
But that I think got me into Rebels, got me into rewatching Clone Wars, because I never watched it when it first aired. So, like, because of Force Awakens, that really opened the doors for me to read and watch other Star Wars content that I was not aware of. So yeah, I was late to the Rebels a little bit, but once I got on it, man, I was just full board. Like, I couldn't wait for the next episode each week. It was just a good show overall, and I think one of the better storytelling Star Wars material we have out there, to be honest. Like you said earlier, season 4 is some of the greatest Star Wars storytelling we have, in my personal opinion. Like, it's that good, it's that deep with lore within the Star Wars canon. Like, it's incredible what they did with that show.
Yeah, let's get into our first episode, Rise of the Old Masters. I'm pretty sure it's the 5th episode of season 1.
Yep.
And we have this. We're establishing now in Spark of Rebellion. At the very end of Spark of Rebellion, Kanan sees Ezra rescue Zeb from Agent Kallus in the last-minute use of instinct and the Force, and he committed to train him as a Jedi. And this is the episode where we really look at the ramifications of that. About, is Ezra ready to be a Jedi? is Kanan ready to teach a Jedi? When we get that a lot in Path of the Jedi as well. But yeah, I've already said a lot. You wanna actually before we do that, I have one more question to ask you.
Yeah.
Why did you choose this? Why Kanan and Ezra?
So I think these two are some of the most, I think, compelling characters that have come out since we've gotten more Star Wars, right? Since the quote-unquote Disney era of Star Wars, if you want to call it. And I think what they did with both of these characters is really open up a lot of possibilities of, man, there were more Jedi out there than we really realized, and then, creating this Master Padawan theme show, in many ways. It was really just a great way to start the era, and to have Kanan and Ezra kind of lead it was really great. I mean, Freddie Prinze Jr. and Taylor Gray, like, just kill it every time when they, every season that they were Kanan Jarrus and Ezra Bridger. Great actors, great, just great overall, choices for these two characters. So, I loved them so much, and I think, the journey of Kanan really from season 1 to season 4 is probably, for me, one of the best, if not the best arcs of a character that you can get in Star Wars. For me, I mean, it's up there, because another one of mine is Asajj Ventress is one of my favorite overall characters arcs, right? Kanan's is up there too. I mean, I think you can have a legit debate with people about Kanan being one of the better overall arcs who you can get in a Star Wars, like, hands down.
He's definitely up there.
The episode that we're talking about, up until that point, you're hitting on it, Eli. Like, Kanan was a very reluctant person to take Ezra as an apprentice because of his past. I mean, just like you said, like, we see what happens when he was a young Padawan. He sees his master die, from the clones because of Order 66, and then he's on the run the rest of his life. So, like, his experiences were so limited. His knowledge of being a Jedi was kind of limited, and he obviously had to learn it kind of on the fly. And that's what I loved about these two, because they learned together throughout this whole series. But specifically this episode, that we're talking about, when, Kanan, they get this message about Luminara might be alive, and Kanan sees it as an opportunity to, I don't know, I mean, obviously Ezra feels like he's pounding him off, but I honestly feel that at that time, Kanan really felt that Luminara would have been a better choice because of her experiences and everything like that. She could teach Ezra more than he could ever do. But I love what that episode did is, kind of reinforce to not only Ezra but to Kanan that Kanan was the right choice for this Padawan. Like, in the grand scheme of things, they were both learning as they go. So they were the perfect pair to come together. And it's only reiterated in this episode with the Grand Inquisitor telling Ezra that Kanan's not the right master, that there's other ways and everything like that. So the fear of Kanan, of him failing Ezra and not being the right teacher for him, was only kind of reinforced through the Grand Inquisitor. And then obviously, after they find out that Luminara actually had passed and it was all a hoax, I think at that time, and then especially at the end of the episode, we find that those two kind of came together and realized that, what, maybe they're not the perfect Jedi or the perfect Padawan, but they're perfect for each other. They're the perfect pair to learn from each other. And, for Kanan to kind of take that leap of, I will teach you what I know to the best of my abilities. And Ezra being, that Padawan to say, I'm here willing to learn. And he calls him master. Like, it's such good storytelling. Like, I love what this even small episode did for their relationship. Like, it was really, for me, it was truly the beginning of, the Padawan and master relationship really, I think, took strides from this point moving forward throughout the series. That's just my opinion. I don't know how you feel, Eli.
I'm just so you talked a little bit about Luminara and Unduli. The fascinating thing I like about Luminara and Unduli, and I was talking about this a little earlier, with the whole idea of stories being told afterwards, enhancing stories that came before. There are two Clone Wars episodes I'm thinking about. Weapons Factory, which is in season 2, and that was released before this, but then there was another one that was released after this called Dangerous Debt in the Martez Sisters arc. And I love this idea that Kanan holds up Luminara as this incredible... I have the quote written down. She was a great Jedi Master. Brave, compassionate, disciplined. In fact, she'd make an excellent Jedi teacher for you. The funny thing is that we see in those episodes that Luminara herself had some flaws.
Yep.
That Luminara herself, was chasing down Zero the Hutt, and Zero the Hutt blew up a building, and the Martez sisters' parents died. And then she just comes up to them and she's like, "May the Force be with you, good luck!"
Right.
And they are resentful of the Jedi afterwards because of that. Likewise, in Weapons Factory, we see, Barriss is forced by Luminara to memorize all 200 passageways in the Geonosian catacombs. And we later see that Barriss falls to the dark side and is put in prison and has never been seen again. Come on, Dave Filoni, you gotta give us back Barriss. You gotta give us back Barriss. But I love the idea that now knowing that Luminara wasn't perfect makes this arc even more interesting.
Yeah, 100% agree, because I think that's the whole lesson, right? I mean, that's the whole lesson that really Kanan had to learn, was that, he's not perfect. The Jedi weren't perfect. I mean, that's a big thing, I think, which I love. I think that we're getting out of like this newer content is that, the Jedi weren't perfect, and that's okay. Like that's kind of part of the journey. You make mistakes, failure, right? I mean, Yoda said it to Luke in The Last Jedi, failure is the greatest teacher. Like, that's something that I think I love what they do, especially I think in Rebels a lot, is that, failure is going to happen, and that was a big thing for Kanan throughout, I think, the series, is him learning that, he might fail. He might fail as a teacher to Ezra, but he can only do the best that he can do with the abilities that he has given in the lessons that he himself has gone through and what he has learned on the run, and that he knows that he, doesn't want Ezra to go down the way he did, which we'll talk about in another episode.
Another thing I was just thinking about, you were talking about also perception, the Jedi's perception. That's covered a lot in this episode. We hear Kanan say to Ezra at the very beginning of the episode, having a laser sword doesn't make you a Jedi. It reminds me of that line, very similarly phrased, from Luke in The Last Jedi. Yep. What, you think I'm just gonna walk out there with a laser sword and take on the whole First Order myself? Right. Of course, the irony there is eventually he does exactly that. But it's this fun little idea that's thrown around a lot here, that Ezra, because of the Jedi's role in the Clone Wars and the Empire's spread of misinformation about the Jedi, doesn't really know what a Jedi is. He doesn't understand what being a Jedi means. In Path of the Jedi, going a little forward, Yoda asks him through this world between worlds facsimile sort of thing.
Yep.
Why do you want to become a Jedi? And he tells Yoda he wants to become a Jedi to protect his friends. And Yoda, I forgot the exact quote of what he says, but he's like, "Hold on there, buddy. That's not what being a Jedi's about." Right. And it's interesting to me because Yoda, and I love Yoda, he's my favorite Star Wars character, but Yoda and a lot of the more progressive-minded Jedi, the Yodas, the Obi-Wans, all those people, still do seem to be on this process of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Yeah. Like, Yoda says such great things like, hey, Ezra, seeking revenge isn't why you should become a Jedi. Right. But then we see you were talking about failure, and I have this controversial opinion, which is that Yoda doesn't realize how failure is supposed to work until he's one with the Force.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't even realize in the original trilogy. Because I'm thinking of that very famous line from Empire. When he lifts the X-Wing up. I don't believe it. That is why you fail. He makes it sound like this very final thing. So it's funny to me that Yoda can say things like, that is why you fail, which shows like his stubbornness, his refusal to change. And then he can also say stuff like, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter, which seems like the things he could have used 20 years ago when the Jedi order was falling into darkness. All this to say, it's interesting what people believe the Jedi to be. Rey, again, in The Last Jedi, Rey tells Luke that she thinks the Force is about lifting rocks.
No, it's such a great line.
She thinks the Force is about lifting rocks, and it's a power you have, she says. And it's fascinating to me how the Jedi, I think Jacob said this in one of our episodes, he's like, the Jedi need a PR representative, because they can never get a single truth straight about themselves. They're always constantly having to correct people's opinions about who they are.
And that's so evident, just like you're talking about, like with the Martez sisters, and how their perception had to change with Ahsoka. But just like you were saying about Ezra, he only knows what a Jedi, like you were just saying, he's so young, he doesn't know what a Jedi is. He knows Kanan is a quote unquote Jedi, but that's not what the Jedi were, how many other, like 10, 15 years ago, when, he finally meets Kanan. It's vastly different. So, and Kanan, for all his faults, he's not a quote unquote, he was never formally, a Jedi master going through the council and all that stuff. He became it because of what he believed in the Force, right? He truly, I think that's one thing I loved about Kanan, and kind of going into that episode of Path of the Jedi, like, he finally realized that, like, the Force is really what drives the Jedi. It's not them being these warriors on these other planets or anything like that. I think that's what he taught Ezra, is that, being with the Force, your connection with the Force is more important than really anything. And that's why I love, throughout the series is Ezra's connection to, animals and how deep that goes. That's such a great, thing for him to learn, is that, the better connections you have with the overall Force, with whatever, with animals, with, the other people around you, like it's those type of connections that really solidify that you're a Jedi, that you're there for the people. And that's what, when he was in that cave, and just like you're talking about earlier, like Yoda's question about why do you want to become a Jedi? He's like, I want to stop, he basically said he wants to, stop the Empire. He wants to save his people and, do all that. And, that's when Yoda said, you seek revenge. And he's like, no, that's not what I seek. He's like, did Kanan teach you that? He's like, no, Kanan never taught me that. And I loved his response of basically telling Yoda that Kanan, along with the others, really showed him that it's more about helping others and, seeing what helping others does to not just him, but to the people that he helps, and the light that, immerses from them, and the hope that, comes from doing that. Like, that's a powerful, powerful thing for a young Padawan like him to learn. And, and him learning it from Kanan is huge. Like, and I don't even think really Kanan realized it until maybe after this episode, because when he talks to Yoda, he learns that, he's only doing the best he can, and that he has to trust his teachings, though limited as they were. He has to trust those teachings and then and push that type of idea onto Ezra. And that's what he proved when Ezra answered Yoda's question, and that's why he got the Kyber crystal in the end. So
yeah,
deep stuff in this
great
episode,
stuff.
really. Yeah.
Another thing I want to bring up is the idea of self-worth. we see Ezra in Rise of the Old Masters, especially having this idea that he is not worth anything. You hear that? He's done with me.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of, Rey, especially because Rey, she was a Star Wars Jedi who had her first appearances very close to when Ezra, and they both struggle with this self-worth thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was in Last Jedi, your parents threw you away like garbage,
Mm-hmm.
or Rise of Skywalker, you're a Palpatine, you don't have any power. That's all his power. That's none of yours. It's
Mm-hmm.
all his power. You don't have any of your own agency, and it's an interesting thing where Kanan isn't doubting Ezra's worth, but
Mm-hmm.
Ezra feels like he is doubting his worth. It's this very
Mm-hmm.
Ezra grew up like he's been described as the Star Wars version of Aladdin, and I like that idea in this case because in Aladdin he disguises himself as a prince in
Mm-hmm.
order to get Jasmine.
Right.
He has to he is so unconfident about his own self-worth
That's
that
a really good point. Yeah.
he has to disguise himself. And same thing with Ezra. He is so unsure about his self-worth. Even now he's a Jedi. Now he has this special gift.
Mm-hmm.
But he can't seem to recognize his own worth.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of that, just like you said, like I think Ezra had such a terrible kind of maybe upbringing because his parents left. He had to really fend for himself for a while, and I think when he felt that Kanan wanted to push him to the side and push him to another Jedi, he probably felt abandoned too at the same time of like not feeling worthy of Kanan's time or Kanan's teachings. He felt that, oh, well, here we go. And I think he even said that to Yoda in the Path of Jedi episode, being like feeling alone, being abandoned. But then he realizes that, that it's actually, I've done it before, I can do it again, I'm a survivalist, and that kind of gave him confidence too at the same time, knowing that that he can survive and he can do it on his own because he's done it before. But feeling, at in that episode, feeling that Kanan was going to abandon him, that must have hurt, like you saying it had to hurt Ezra a lot. But then, especially at the end of that episode when he said, I don't want anybody else, I want you. Like he was telling Kanan, I want to be with you. I don't want anybody else to teach me.
Yeah.
You are the one that is teaching me, so much more than just being a Jedi. He's teaching them to be more self-aware of others and not just about himself, and that was huge. That's a huge lesson for a kid that's been on his own for
We come back to
quite some time.
we come back to the Rise of Skywalker quote that I come back to a lot. They win by making you feel like you're alone.
Right.
And we see that quite literally in Path of the Jedi, where we see the crew of the Ghost, and I'm laughing because I'm just imagining Vanessa Marshall and Steve Blum and Tia Sarkar recording this scene they're like, yeah, I guess the kid didn't make it. Oh well, what a shame.
Right.
Too bad, so sad. It's a hilarious scene because it's I can just imagine them being like, are we supposed to be doing this right now?
Right.
Are we supposed to be acting this mean? And then soon enough, the Inquisitor or whatever it is in the vision kills them. It's this very, they win by making you feel you're alone. The Inquisitor kills Kanan in that vision. The Inquisitor in this case, in both episodes, but especially in Path of the Jedi, because this is all a vision quest that Ezra's going on,
right,
is this representation of everything that Ezra fears. And, by facing his fears, this is how he becomes a Jedi. This is how he, we see in other episodes of Rebels I'm just flashing to. Shroud of Darkness, Season 2. We see Kanan confronting his own fears. And then he gets knighted for it.
Yep.
Confronting fear is the destiny of the Jedi, also the Rise of Skywalker.
Right. It's huge because I think it's a huge part of a Padawan's journey, right? Even Luke went down his little vision tunnel in Empire Strikes Back.
Cave. So, learned have you your failure at the cave. Yeah.
Right. So it's important that Ezra went through that journey. I mean, it's a part of being a Jedi, a part of going down that road, and because he did it, he got the Kyber crystal at the end. So it's such a huge part of really Ezra, but even like I said, Kanan learning to trust Ezra and to learn patience with him, right? Because he was about to just he's taking too long, and then Yoda's like use what you learn, use patience.
Did you not as well?
Right.
Yeah.
So like it's a big thing, right?
Which is funny thing. Actually, I just realized because Yoda has to be reminded that himself in Empire.
Right.
Too old. He is too old. You are reckless. So was I, if you remember.
Right. It's huge, right? I mean, it's just part of a journey for any Jedi, and seeing it through Ezra and knowing what he has gone through in that first kind of half of the season. Like it's big. It's huge for him to come out and realize that he can be somebody that is on the path to be a Jedi, because I think throughout those first 9 episodes, he was scared, especially after that episode when they were in Anaxis and he summoned that huge creature. Like that was terrifying, and that's what scared Kanan to really kind of be like, okay, we got to figure something out.
Pump the brakes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And this was part of that pumping the brakes process, is for him to go through a quest just like any Padawan did. And he did. He came out a better Jedi and a better person. Ezra did for sure, and learned from Yoda, and really took his word seriously. And then again, Kanan, even just learning that little bit from Yoda at that time, like it was needed for Kanan, because he was very scared, because he told Yoda, I sensed it, what Ezra may be going down that dark path, and he was afraid that he was going to mess that up, and he didn't want Ezra to go down the same path he did. So it's a huge episode, I think, especially in the first season. Like to have this type of episode in season 1 for these two characters was huge, and you got even the Yoda voice, Frank Oz. It was great. It was
absolutely.
It was good stuff, and it's a big and then for Kanan or for Ezra to get this Kyber crystal. I love that he didn't know what it was. I mean, that just shows how he really didn't, he was learning. He was still learning about the Jedi and all that. And then Kanan's like, dude, that's a Kyber crystal. What is that? It's a lightsaber crystal. Like, so
the Star Wars, at least the new era of Star Wars, has a fascination with characters in the Star Wars universe who don't know about Star Wars.
Right, that's fair. I like it.
Din in The Mandalorian is just a Star Wars character who doesn't know about Star Wars.
Right.
Does this look Jedi to you?
But it's great to see Ezra, and I love that end of that episode, because the whole crew's there, right? And Ezra has been working on the lightsaber for weeks, and they've all helped him, giving them different parts, even Chopper. So it's great that moment when he comes down and shows Kanan his lightsaber, and Kanan's like, well, it's unconventional, and that kind of fits you, so that's cool, but turn it on, and he turns it on. That blue saber lights. It's a great, and that's one of my favorite sabers that he had, is that first one.
It's an incredible lightsaber. And one of the things I noticed is that what I love is that who is the first person besides Ezra to touch his lightsaber? It's Kanan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of the moment where Obi-Wan tells Anakin in Attack of the Clones, this weapon is your life.
Yep.
And when Anakin in the episode of the Clone Wars Hostage Crisis gives his lightsaber to Padme, when Obi-Wan when I first constructed my lightsaber, Obi-Wan told me, "This weapon is your life. This weapon is my life."
Right.
And that's only something you can say romantically, but like that this relationship that Ezra and Kanan have, that Kanan is the first person to hold Ezra's lightsaber besides him.
Mm-hmm. It's huge. I mean,
it's a massive. Huge bond of trust.
Mm-hmm.
It's this huge, as much as being a Jedi isn't about holding your laser sword,
mm-hmm.
the lightsaber is a huge representation of the Jedi.
Yeah.
It's a huge, it's there's something from, I think it might be even from Legends, like relying on your lightsaber as an extension of your arm. Mm-hmm. It's an extension of your body. It's like part of you.
And that's huge in High Republic too, that the whole kind of lightsaber, how those Jedi treated that type of, accessory or weapon or whatever.
Yeah.
Very similar, right?
I mean, it's no wonder that, most Padawans we see in that arc in the Clone Wars, they go through the Gathering mm-hmm. in a very Harry Potter one, choose the wizard sort of way.
Yep.
If you have an instrument like that functions as a part of you, mm-hmm. you're gonna bet that's gonna not be an easy process to get your equipment for that lightsaber.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's cool to see, as an audience, we get to see Ezra go through that journey, and get to that point where, Yoda or, the Force felt it was time for Ezra to, become a Jedi and, build his own lightsaber and all that stuff. And it's so cool that his lightsaber, was like a retro kind of laser gun too at the same time. Like,
yeah,
that was such a cool, that's one of my favorite, like I said, it's one of my favorite sabers that I think that they designed and that a character kind of came up with, because it was practical and it was very useful, especially for what they did, right? I mean, they were in, they were more, helping others, and, lightsaber probably wasn't always going to, hold up, but, a blaster might. And so using, the two at the same time was kind of, ingenious, really. So yeah. I loved that whole, his first lightsaber was great.
And there's a great sort of thing with that where, it gets destroyed in at the end of season 2 in Twilight Apprentice. Darth Vader destroys the lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what that says about the story, because the story just went from a 2 in darkness to about a 9 in darkness. and the darkness is ramping up, and Ezra's lightsaber, which is the symbol of his first, almost innocence of the Jedi, mm-hmm. gone. See ya. Bye. We are now entering this darker era of Rebels storytelling.
Yeah, and which leads right into, that episode that, the last episode and what we're going to talk about. Yep. Yeah. I mean, those first 2 episodes in season 3, man, they were really good, especially that first one. Sets up to what we've all kind of were worried about at the end of season 2, is Ezra going down a dark path, and, him taking that walker and,
where did Kanan teach you that?
He didn't. That's one of my favorite lines in this entire series, because it's so
chilling.
It's dark, right? It's dark how he said it, his answer, and he meant it too. Like, he didn't teach me that. Like,
yeah.
So that journey of, Ezra and Kanan, and Ezra blaming himself for Kanan going blind, and what happened to Ahsoka and everything on Malachor. Ezra felt a really big responsibility for what had happened. And so in that in this episode, Holocrons of Fate, especially the parts where it was Ezra and Kanan talking to the Bendu, it was such needed, dialogue between those two, to go through, this little, the Holocrons in there, the Bendu forcing them to work together.
Once a secret is known, it cannot be unknown.
I mean, and the Bendu is one of the greatest characters too from this series. But having them, help each other, and for Ezra to finally kind of realize, and for Kanan to tell him, I don't blame you for what happened on Malachor. I never have, and I never will. And Ezra needed to hear that, because like we were saying, like,
did need to hear that.
Like, because in the beginning of the series, right, those first 2 episodes, he felt that he was responsible, and Kanan, was never really there, kind of from what we can tell. He never, never was there to tell Ezra that until these moments in this episode. So huge stuff with these two, because it's big, right? It's a big connection piece with these. It's moving forward too. My God, moving forward, it's huge. It's huge. This episode was really huge.
One of the things I was thinking about is about what the Bendu said, to your point. If you want it, you must seek it out with him.
Mm-hmm.
If we're looking at that symbolic imagery there, if we're looking at like the Sith holocron, is the representation of the newfound struggle between Ezra and Kanan.
Yep.
Because all of the problems come from that thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically a box, okay? It's a box, but it represents everything, every bit of resentment Ezra holds against Kanan, and every bit of worry Kanan holds for Ezra.
Yep.
And speaking of the Sith and the dark side, I'd love to talk a little bit about Maul. Because Maul is the anti-Kanan.
Yep.
If it could not, Filoni likes his imagery, he really does, and he could not have made it clearer by making Kanan the angel and Maul the devil on Ezra's shoulder.
Yep.
And Maul realizes this. So what does he do? He throws Kanan out of an airlock. And which is interesting. I love this. People complaining about the Leia thing in The Last Jedi.
I was just thinking about that today.
Rebels did it first!
Right, Kanan did it first.
Rebels did it first!
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and like, I was watching it and it was like, wow, this looks so similar to Leia in The Last Jedi.
It's crazy, right? But it worked. It's so... Yeah. Again, how they did that with Leia, and then they did it with Kanan again in this season, which is well before the Last Jedi or whatever. Like, it was huge, and for Kanan to jump back in and to know that he has to go save Ezra from doing what he was doing, But there was a moment before they get to where Maul had the rest of the crew, and they talk to the Bendu, they have the holocron, they're on their way, and Kanan tells Ezra, you use the Sith holocron to connect with Maul before, open it up and see what happens. And there's a moment where Ezra, he took a moment to think about it, and he decided not to open it, and he said, "I'd rather hear what you think." Kanan. So it's the beginning of Ezra learning to think things through. Don't rush into things very like a Sith would. Don't rush into it. Don't use your anger, your aggression, or anything like that. Use your senses. Use the Force. Let them tell you what to do next, and that's a huge part. I think
it relates to a conversation that they have at the beginning of Holocrons of Fate.
Mm-hmm.
There are secrets in there that can help us destroy the Sith. Ezra, the secrets in that thing almost destroy you.
Yeah.
It's a Star Wars dilemma that we go back to all the time on the Galaxy. What do you want, and what are you willing to do to get it?
Right.
How far are you willing to go in order to get what you want?
Mm-hmm.
It's the line that we reference constantly from the Clone Wars episode Lair of Grievous. Mm-hmm. In this war, a danger there is of losing who we are.
Yep.
When you go down this cycle, it's constantly this balance. It's constantly this balancing scale. Another thing I was thinking about is this great exchange between Bendu and Kanan.
Mm-hmm.
After Ezra goes into the cave. This is the best thing ever. Why take his weapon?
Oh, yeah.
He has to learn to solve problems without it.
Yep. Huge lesson.
If we're going back to the perception of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
What, you think I'm going to walk out there with a laser sword and take on the entire First Order?
Right.
Notice, and one of my minor critiques of The Last Jedi, which is a movie I love, is that we don't have a full-on lightsaber duel in that movie.
That's fair.
But in that vein, when Luke does that force projection on Crate, his and Kylo's lightsabers never touch once.
Right.
Why take his weapon? He has to learn to solve problems without it. Yep. It's a Jedi thing to resort to violence when you have to. But it's an even more Jedi thing to find a non-violent solution to something.
It's huge. This is, again, there's that lesson that he taught Ezra in this episode of learning to use your wits, your smarts, to use the Force. Don't use your lightsaber as your first go-to, right? Just like you were talking about. Like, it's such a huge lesson. And then the other lesson of, don't blame yourself. Don't blame yourself for something that you had no control or I didn't have control. Just like Kanan told him, like, it's not your fault, man. You didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. It's okay. Like, it's okay that it happened. We're both alive. We can still move forward from this. And I think that's a huge, huge, huge lesson for Ezra moving forward. And especially obviously what happens later on. That was such a great thing, about the show, is that Kanan taught Ezra so much little by little, right? It wasn't just these huge dumps of lessons after lessons. Like, it was just these little weave-in moments just like that, like taking his lightsaber away and then saying he has to learn to do stuff without it. Like, it's just these small lessons that Ezra finally put it all together at the end of this show. And it was beautiful.
It's also, I love how much Ezra taught Kanan.
Yes.
And how much they taught each other. Speaking of Kanan teaching Ezra, I want to go back to the very beginning of Rise of the Old Masters. There's a really brilliant series of quotes in here. Focus. Do or do not. There is no try. Well, that makes no sense. How can I do something if I don't try to do it? Well, see, actually that one always confused me too, but Master Yoda sure used to say it a lot.
That's such a great line.
It sounds like a throwaway. It's not throwaway at all.
Nope.
It is, they reference it several times through the episode. If you try to do something, if you think that you're trying, then you're not putting the effort you need to,
right,
to believe in yourself. It's about believing in yourself,
right?
And it's a throwaway line, but it informs the episode. It informs, it informs how the episode shapes itself.
Right.
I'm trying to think if I got anything else on here. You got anything?
No, you know what? No, not. I mean, those three episodes to me are big, like, kind of coming together pieces for those two. I mean, there's tons of them throughout the series, but I think these three specifically, especially the early on ones in season 1, just paved the way for what was going to happen later on in this series. And then, like, we get to season 3 and Holocrons of Fate, and again, they're still learning from each other even after all this time together. The Kanan is still learning from Ezra, like you said, and Ezra's obviously still learning from Kanan. And it's such a huge thing for him to kind of dip his toes into the dark side, but for Kanan to bring him out of that, and for Kanan to show him that no, that's not the way. This is the way. What I've been teaching you, what we have been going through this entire time, is the correct way and the correct path for you. It's not this quick and easy, using the dark side gets results, but it's a trap. Just like he told him in that episode, like, it's not the answer. It's not the solution to the entire problem. And you have to learn that, Ezra. And he did finally. He really did. And it's because of Kanan's, very kind of different approach to teaching Ezra, because again, he never got formal training really. So like this is all brand new to Kanan. So, him not having formal training probably really benefited Ezra in himself, really, because he kind of had to learn on the fly, like we've been talking about. So, the kind of unconventional way of teaching Ezra, I think, helped more than it really hindered in the long run, in my opinion,
Yeah. Maul is the anti-Kanan, because Kanan is this older brother, father figure to Ezra.
Right.
But Maul is only using Ezra.
Right.
It's very clear that, what Maul wanted Ezra to do was combine that holocron and go all the way with him. And after that didn't happen, it all starts to go downhill, honestly, with Maul and Ezra. Until eventually in Twin Sons, where Ezra actively aids in his demise.
Right. I mean, that whole journey of Ezra and Maul really throughout season 3 was really good stuff, because again, it's that what you were talking about earlier, Eli, the angel and devil on Ezra's shoulders. It was huge that Kanan was the angel, obviously Maul was the devil, and Ezra had to see that wasn't the right way to do things. He had to go through that process to learn, right? Like it was, like you're saying, it was inevitable for Ezra to do what he did, but he learned from it. And that's what Kanan could only hope for, was that Ezra would learn to, not go to the dark side. And he did, because later on in the season 3, when they go to Dathomir and go to the cave, like Ezra doesn't, he knows that this is not what he should be doing. He knows that Maul is just trying to use him. So, Ezra did learn, and he learned from what Kanan was telling him, that that's not the way, and that this is the path that you're on is more true when you don't do things quick and easy, and that you listen to the Force and trust yourself and everything like that. So, again, it's just great storytelling overall for
Absolutely.
Rebels,
I agree. I guess I'll just end on this one, which I think is an interesting, the reluctant master trope in Star Wars. You're undisciplined and full of self-doubt, and whose fault is that, master? There's that, I think of Obi-Wan in Phantom Menace telling Anakin, "You will be a Jedi, I promise," but not looking so sure of himself in that moment. I think of, Luke and Rey in Last Jedi, you're supposed to restore balance in the Force and defeat the First Order. Go away! And, we have those people who aren't looking to be a teacher. Kanan was not looking to be a teacher.
Nope.
But the best masters are the ones who have that thrust upon them and then take it in stride.
Yep.
And then go with the flow.
Yep.
Rey was a much better Jedi after what Luke taught her. Ezra was a much better Jedi after what Kanan taught him. Anakin... Okay, we're gonna get back to Anakin. But, the dark side complicates that a little bit, but Anakin was a better Jedi after what Obi-Wan taught him. That's
That's fair. That's really, really fair. I mean, it's such a big thing, like you're saying, the reluctant teacher. I mean, you see it a lot in Star Wars. You see it in the High Republic. You see it in Clone Wars. You see a lot of it, and it just makes sense, especially with Kanan, especially his experiences up until that point, of seeing Ezra. I know he's been on the run. He saw his master, killed in Order 66. So the reluctant part of him made sense, but it took this young Padawan for him to realize that he had a higher purpose, that he had a higher purpose within the Force. And then obviously we see that come to full circle in season 4, so it's a journey of, not just a Padawan, but a master too, like you're saying, Eli. Yeah. Like it's a full circle journey for both of them. It's just
absolutely
great stuff.
I'm gonna end with this little detail, which I just thought of. We see Kanan, when Kanan's tortured by the Inquisitor at the end of season 1 of Rebels. I remember he says to the Inquisitor that his master's last words to him were "run." And And we then see that, of course, in the first episode of The Bad Batch.
Yep.
When Kanan is pinned down by the Inquisitor during their lightsaber duel in Rise of the Old Masters, Kanan tells Ezra to run.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't die there, of course, but, like, he thinks it's the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that little parallel there. We have Kanan realizing what it must have been like for his master back then.
Yeah,
and
that's good stuff. Yep.
Yeah, you know, it's awesome.
It's a really good point, Eli. Really good point. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it for this theme between themes. We still have some stuff. We have everyone's favorite part of Star Wars in a Galaxy.
What you've brought me today is worth 1/4 portion.
We have 1/4 portion, which is the section of Star Wars in a Galaxy where we do a little something different. This throughout the summer recording sessions, I've been doing this thing called Quick Rank, where I give categories, and we'll talk about our top 5 from these categories, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
The first one I have is top 5 Jedi characters.
Ooh, okay. So, top 5 Jedi characters, and I'll go with Rey was one of them. Obi-Wan. I'll consider Ahsoka a Jedi character, even I know she says she's not a Jedi.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine. Okay, and then I'll go Kanan and Ezra, man. I really do. Those are my top 5. It always changes, though, right? Like, just in the moment right now, I would have to go with Rey, Obi, Ahsoka, Kanan, Ezra. I think those 5 really embodied what a Jedi was really meant to be, right? That's just my take. Like, they really embodied who they were, what they really stood for in the end of, you know, of everything. You know, they were the embodiment of a Jedi and what they represented. So those are my top 5.
I'm gonna have 5 very boring choices here. Yoda, Rey, Luke sorry, I misspoke. Yoda, Rey Skywalker. We have to call her by her proper name. Yoda, Rey Skywalker, Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ahsoka Tano. Yoda's my favorite character. Yoda's my favorite character in all of Star Wars. I'm pretty sure those are my top 5 Star Wars characters in general, because I'm a huge Jedi fan, just in general. But those 5 are the Jedi who are most easily able to recognize their mistakes,
that's a good call.
and to learn from them and all that kind of stuff. I would add some other ones, like honorable mentions, of course. You know, you gotta mention people like Ezra Bridger, like Kit Fisto, like Ben Solo, like all those people. I feel like we definitely gotta mention in there. So yeah, the next one is a little interesting one. I've been thinking about this one for a while.
Okay.
Top 5 Star Wars middle portions, and here's what I mean by middle portions. Either it could be like the second act of a Star Wars movie from any of the movies, or I'm thinking like, you know, like episodes from season 2 or 3 of Star Wars Rebels, right in there in the middle, or like, you know, seasons 3 and 4 of the Clone Wars right there in the middle. Like stuff that really feels like a good like climactic point
in the Rebels. So I'll stick with Rebels for a couple maybe. If you're looking at season 2, season 3 of Rebels, I mean, you look at the finale of season 2, you know, with Twilight of the Apprentice. Some of the best Star Wars I think we've ever gotten, whether that's animated, live action, movie, whatever. I think that those 2 episodes are huge within the Star Wars universe, Star Wars galaxy. Okay, so the second act of, I think, The Last Jedi is some of the best stuff ever I think we will get within Star Wars. I really do. I think that whole second
Praetorian
half,
Guards, Canto Bite, like
it's good stuff.
That's pretty good.
It's good stuff. I mean, throughout that, you know, throughout that movie, you know, it built up to that second half, and that second half just took off after that first half. You know, you get the Rey and Luke confrontation, you get Rey and Ben Kylo's, you know, fighting together. A lot of good stuff in Last Jedi second half. Honestly, I think the second half of Empire Strikes Back is deep stuff.
The second act of Empire,
yeah, it's deep stuff.
Yeah,
deep
that was
stuff.
on my list as well. I'm going to talk about because Empire is not one of my favorite Star Wars movies, but the second act of, I mean, I like all of them, but like the second act of Empire is, I think, in my opinion, the best second act of a Star Wars movie. Period.
I wouldn't disagree with you. It's really that good, right? I mean, there's just deep stuff, deep, Star Wars lore.
Dagobah, the asteroid field, like that's where
it's good
I like
stuff.
that adventure-headed stuff. Yeah,
it's good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I think another one, if I'm like Rogue One, second half of Rogue One was fabulous stuff. I mean, just some really deep
Rogue One, yeah, absolutely.
Deep stuff, I mean, just good canon, great, obviously Vader stuff that we got, the hallway scene. But, the whole thing on Scarif was awesome, amazing, the fights and what Jyn was going through. It's just good stuff all around. The final one that I can think of, overall, the second half of, I'm trying to think of like another like Rebels. I mean, this really okay. I'll say this: the second half of season 4 of Rebels is probably, from I think episodes maybe like 6 on, or even
just like Jedi 8. Knight. That's kind of the second act.
I mean,
Jedi Knight. That's kind of the second act of.
I mean, that whole second half of season 4. Again, some of the deepest Star Wars lore we have gotten.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's some of the best Star Wars, like, just not weird, but just different, but it was fabulous. The world between worlds. Right. World between worlds, Kanan, the Jedi Knight. I mean, God, that's just deep stuff. Deep Star Wars, lore and everything. And I loved it. So those are probably my favorite second half parts.
I'm gonna go with something that's right smack dab in the middle of The Mandalorian. That's the Marshal, the season 2 premiere. It's that very good beginning of that season, but it's also the very good like the continuation. The story continues. Mm-hmm. I've talked so much about how much praise I have for that episode. The Mandalorian, the Marshal's great. It's good. As I alluded to before, Empire's second act is the best second act of a Star Wars movie.
Agreed.
The Dagobahs and your asteroid fields and, Lando's not a system, he's a man and all that kind of stuff. It's some of the most adventure Star Wars has felt. Until maybe like Rise of Skywalker feels very adventurous in the first act of that movie. But
first half, yeah.
But the third one I'm going with is an arc that's placed right in the middle of the Clone Wars, and that's Mortis.
Oh, good call.
Like, the crux of Star Wars right there. And all of the stuff with the daughter and the son, and we did a crazy episode on that. This was, I don't know, a few months ago, called The Nature of the Force, which was so fun diving into that. You can never go wrong with the movie that
Mortis is so good.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I was moving on to my number 4. You can never go wrong with my favorite movie in the Skywalker saga, and that's Return of the Jedi. The second act of Return of the Jedi is flawless. Yep. It's just flawless. Like the scenes on the home one, I'm With You 2, the beginning stuff on Andor, the stuff with the speeder bikes. I mean, it's not my favorite second arc of anything. I think that's probably Empire, but like, I like Return of the Jedi just generally more of the movie than Empire, and the second act is great.
Yeah, agreed.
5th, I'm going to go with a sleeper pick. Ooh. Second act of Solo, A Star Wars Story.
Ooh, I was thinking that.
Yeah.
I don't
Second act of Solo. It's where that movie breathes. I'm not as big of a fan of Solo as some people. I like it a lot. I'm not, I don't love it. But the second act on Kessel, the stuff we see on Kessel is pretty darn good. Yep. The stuff we see, with like the death of L3 and the Kessel Run finally get to see that in action all that kind of stuff is very good. I really like that.
Yeah, so I that's an honorable mention for me for sure. Solo, that second half of that movie was just, I think after the train raid and all that, like you're saying, the Kessel Run. All that, getting back to Voss, Voss and the switcheroo and all the fight and the like this. It's good stuff. Like Solo was such a fun movie and for what it did, and it was just a good fun ride. But that second half really peaked. It did. It made that movie even that much better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I enjoyed it for sure.
So now, we got some. I called them the speed round before, but I'm not calling them the speed round because if I know one thing, Star Wars fans and Star Wars content creators are terrible at taking short amounts of time to answer things. Fair. So I'm just gonna. We have our little interview questions. We got 10 of these hard-hitting questions. They'll be. I think you'll find them pretty tricky. Number one is very tricky. Who is your favorite Star Wars character?
Asajj Ventress. She's my favorite character. I think her overall arc is, again, some of the best, and I think, I don't think it's talked about enough. Her journey, especially when you read Dark Disciple and you see the completion of it. Because man, I would love to see that in animation, but even reading it in a book was damn good. And her overall character was just it was so good. I mean, the torture and the redemption is just it's good. It's good.
Yeah, I do like. I've liked Ventress's character more and more over the years.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question. What is your Star Wars movie ranking? If you don't have a ranking laid out, you can do like a top 5 or a favorite or a top 3 or something like that.
Oh man, so I'll say this: rankings for me, I enjoy them. I'm not a huge ranker because I think it changes for me like on a daily basis. It's kind of like you probably go through this too, Eli. Like what your mood is, like what Star Wars mood are you in? It could be Return of the Jedi, could be Rise of Skywalker, could be Phantom Menace.
I feel like I'm always in a Return of the Jedi mood. That's the one that doesn't change for me. It's like, sometimes I'm in a Solo mood, sometimes I'm in a Revenge of the Sith mood, sometimes I'm in like a Last Jedi mood. Mm-hmm. I'm always in a Return of the Jedi mood.
That's
always.
Fair. No, that's fair. But I'll say, I'll go with like my top 5 movies would probably, these aren't in like, any particular order, but the 5 that I probably watched the most is Empire Strikes Back, probably Last Jedi, Revenge of the Sith. That's 3. I watch Solo a lot, and Rogue One. Honestly, these are just ones that I've been watching more recently. Those are probably the 5.
Yeah, they're all great. Honestly, I think.
Right.
Number 3, I'm gonna include a little bit of a caveat on this one.
Okay.
So it's favorite non-movie Star Wars media that people are missing out on.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you're going to answer Rebels. So
that's fair.
I'm going to say answer the question and then answer the question excluding Rebels.
Okay. So excluding Rebels, I honestly think, and I hope this works, the High Republic, if you're not reading those books, you're missing out, man, because it is some fascinating storytelling, fascinating characters, the lore that they're building, and just what's going on in the galaxies. Great stuff. Like, I would highly recommend, especially if you and I just listened to Kevin Scott's latest book on audio. That was my first Star Wars book I listened to audio, and man, it's fun. Just the production they do with those audiobooks, I didn't know. The sound effects, the Mark Thompson reading it is fantastic. I highly recommend the High Republic stuff if you're not reading that material.
Absolutely.
It's a must.
Land of the Jedi, Rising Storm, Into the Dark, Race to Crash Point Power, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay,
next question. Who is your favorite Star Wars background character? Everybody has one.
Ooh, background character. There's so many good ones, for background, but I gotta say, I don't know if they're really considered background, but the 2 guys in the cantina in A New Hope that bother Luke, or the guy that gets his arm chopped up.
Evazan and Ponda Bala, I consider them background characters. They showed up in the comics a few times, but
and they were in Rogue One. They did that real quick.
You just
cameo.
watch yourself.
Right, yeah. Those two are probably my, that come to my head the most are those two, I think.
Yeah,
for sure.
Amazon and
yeah,
Ponte good ones.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is like I'm a Star Wars trivia buff, so like anytime I get to hear about characters who only are referred to by their last names and I hear about their first names.
Nice.
Dr. Cornelius Evazon.
Right.
Or I found out recently, I just got somewhere in here, I don't know where it is. I just got the new Clone Wars character encyclopedia, and I found out that, remember Admiral Killian from the end of Season 2 of the Clone Wars? He has a first name that I didn't realize. His first name is Shoun. Shoun Killian.
Shoun Killian. Star Wars names are the best.
They don't have to, they just do.
Right.
They just give them first names, because why the heck not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. Okay, next question. What, in your opinion, is the coolest Star Wars species?
Ooh, I gotta go with Ahsoka's. I think it's the Togrutas. I can't pronounce it. Togrutans. I think they're the coolest, honestly. Yeah, I think just the look of them and just, because I guess maybe because I am a big Ahsoka fan, like I just love that species.
Ahsoka, Shakti, and all those.
I love that species. That's probably one of my favorites for sure. I think it's got to be them, especially in High Republic, because you're getting more of that species in the High Republic. So it's kind of cool seeing, learning more about them way, like 200 years prior to. So it's
and
cool.
in the Clone Wars with the Kyros arc. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Next question. Favorite Star Wars planet? What is your favorite Star Wars planet?
Ooh, I gotta go with Naboo. Naboo is just, it's classic. It's it's the start of it all, right? I mean, it's where we start in Phantom Menace. Like, it's just, it's the home of, Padme Amidala, and she's the mom of Luke and Leia. Like, it's just good stuff. Like, Naboo. It's beautiful. I would love to, like, visit there. It'd be awesome. So Naboo for me.
Good stuff. I love Naboo as well. If you were in the Star Wars universe, what would your job be?
Ooh, I would hope I'd be like on the good side. So like maybe maybe owning my own, like, I don't know, shop or something, or maybe being like a like maybe having like a food truck in space in some way, shape, or form, going to different planets. Or...
A space food truck.
Yeah, like something like that. Some kind of low key like that. Or if I really was in the dark side mood, I'd probably be something like an Imperial IB agent, like Callus or something.
ISB.
Yeah, I think that'd be kind of cool.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
In the behind the scenes documentary for Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, George Lucas says a quote that I quote often on the show. It's like poetry, they rhyme. Every stanza sort of, rhymes with the last. Hopefully it'll work. What is your favorite Star Wars, it's like poetry, it rhymes moment? It could be from anything. It doesn't just have to be from the movies.
I think, honestly, there's a couple things that come to mind. One, the hello there. Like, you hear, obviously Kenobi says it. And then you hear in Rebels, since we're talking about Rebels, Ezra says it in season 4. They're in... And
Grievous says it before Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
And Obi-Wan says it in New Hope before Obi-Wan.
Right, so the hello there is, I think, one of those things that just sticks with it, yeah. Then I think the other thing that just comes to mind is just, the overall theme in Star Wars of, like, family. Like, that's just... Yeah. It's huge. It's
with
huge
the Ghost crew, there's a mini family in every trilogy,
Yeah, every animated, like, there's just that theme, right?
I could go into depth about how much I love Rey Skywalker, but I'm not going to because I've done that so much already. But like, yeah, I love that moment because of that family theme a lot.
Yeah.
If you could take one item or force power from Star Wars into the real world, what would you take?
I mean, the easy answer is lightsaber, right? I mean, who wouldn't want a cool lightsaber? But I'll go with, besides a lightsaber, I'll go with a speeder bike. I always wanted, ever since Return of the Jedi, man, I wanted one. Those things are so cool. I would love to ride one of those things. That'd be awesome. So, speeder bike for me.
Awesome. That's a good answer. Finally, the final question. We've had a bit of a pronunciation disagreement with Devore from a larger deal of force. And because of that, it's become the butt of a joke that we do in every guest episode. I'm just gonna pull up the name of a character, and you just tell me how you pronounce the name of the character. That's all. That's all I want you to do.
I cannot. I'll say, is it Zem Winnel? That's how I say it. But again,
Zam Wessel or Zam Wazell?
Wazell. I'll say Sam Wazell. Wazell.
Oh, you're a Wazeller.
I'll say Wazeller. I'll say Wazeller. Yeah.
That is the first. Before you're now vindicated. Every single person up to you, except for him, has said Wessel.
Wessel? I'll say Wazell. What the heck?
So here's the controversy. I learned it as Wessel, but in a video game, in the Star Wars Bounty Hunter video game, which is no longer canon, she introduces herself. She says, "Hi, I'm Zam Wazell."
Wazell, okay.
And Jacob and I looked around and we were like, "What? Why does she do that? Her name is Wessel." The crazy part is there's no pronunciation guide on Wikipedia, the canon section. In the legends section, it accepts both. Oh, so nice. We just don't know what to do. So it's a fun one.
I'm terrible. Yeah. That's one thing about Star Wars is that I as much as I love Star Wars and like the names they come up with, I hate trying to say them.
Yeah, oh my god, awful. Like all the Tusken Raiders and the Throns and all that stuff.
Right? Like, yeah. Forget about it. Forget about it.
It's great. Yeah. I think that's going to be it for this episode of Star Wars in a Galaxy. Thank you so much to Lauren for coming on the show. This is the time where you can plug where you can be found and all that kind of stuff.
All right, awesome. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Eli. This was fun. I love talking Rebels.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like talking Star Wars all together.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so you guys can follow me, Lauren, at Loro Knows on Twitter and Instagram. And you can follow the GALactic Podcast at the GALactic Pod on Twitter. And we are on all the major platforms, Apple Pod, Google Play, Spotify, all the good stuff. So just look us up, find us, and you will find all of our episodes. We got 74 out, which is crazy.
That's nuts.
It's crazy to think about, yeah.
The grind continues.
The grind continues.
Yeah, and you can find us at In a Galaxy Pod on Twitter, at Star Wars in a Galaxy on Instagram. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on Anchor. Anywhere you listen to your podcast, we will be there. Next week, hopefully, I say hopefully because things with this podcast are crazy. Jacob and I are going to be back on our regular schedule, posting regular episodes, not pre-records. We're going to be looking at the Clone Wars episodes, A Friend in Need, Deception, and Friends and Enemies. Hopefully. Who knows with this show. Yeah, but anyway, thank you so much for listening again, and may the Force be with you always.